Sarah Martinez never imagined that a simple weekend visit to see her boyfriend would transform her from a college student into a war hero. What started as a romantic getaway to a military base in Afghanistan became a life-or-death situation that would test every skill she had learned during her childhood, hunting trips with her grandfather. When enemy forces breached the perimeter and chaos erupted around her, Sarah found herself holding a sniper rifle with the lives of dozens of soldiers hanging in the balance. This is the extraordinary true story of how an ordinary young woman's quick thinking and deadly accuracy turned the tide of battle and saved an entire military outpost from certain destruction. Sarah Martinez packed her small duffel bag with trembling hands, excitement coursing through her veins as she prepared for what would be the most important trip of her young life. At 22 years old, she had never traveled further than the neighboring state, let alone halfway around the world to visit her boyfriend stationed at a remote military base in Afghanistan. The morning sun streamed through her college dormitory window as she carefully folded her clothes, making sure to include the lucky charm bracelet her grandmother had given her years ago. Her boyfriend, Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, had been deployed for 8 months, and their relationship had survived on video calls, text messages, and handwritten letters that took weeks to arrive. When he mentioned that civilian visitors were occasionally allowed on base during special circumstances, Sarah immediately began the lengthy approval process. After months of background checks, interviews, and paperwork, she finally received the green light for a 10-day visit. The journey to Afghanistan was grueling, involving 3 connecting flights and nearly 30 hours of travel time. Sarah had never been on a plane before, and the massive cargo aircraft that transported her for the final leg of the journey was unlike anything she had imagined. The interior was stripped down to bare metal, with cargo nets and equipment strapped to every available surface. She sat alongside military personnel returning from leave, their faces weathered and serious, carrying the weight of experiences she could barely comprehend. As the plane descended through thick clouds, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the Afghan landscape below. The terrain was harsh and unforgiving, with rocky mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. The base appeared as a small cluster of buildings and structures surrounded by high walls and guard towers, looking impossibly isolated in the vast desert wilderness. Forward Operating Base Phoenix was home to approximately 300 soldiers from various units, including infantry, logistics, intelligence, and support personnel. The base served as a critical strategic point in the region, monitoring enemy activity and providing support for missions throughout the surrounding valleys. Sarah was amazed by the complex organization required to keep such a remote outpost functioning. From the solar panels that provided electricity to the sophisticated communication equipment that connected the soldiers to the outside world. Michael met her at the landing strip, his face lighting up with a smile that made the entire exhausting journey worthwhile. He looked different than she remembered, more serious and confident, wearing the desert camouflage uniform that had become his daily attire. They embraced briefly before he led her through the security checkpoints and orientation briefings that all visitors were required to complete. The base commander, Colonel Rodriguez, personally welcomed Sarah during her arrival briefing. He explained the rules and restrictions that govern civilian visitors, emphasizing the importance of staying within designated areas and following all safety protocols. The briefing covered everything from meal times and communication procedures to emergency protocols and evacuation procedures. Sarah listened carefully, understanding that these weren't suggestions but life-saving requirements in such a dangerous environment. Her accommodations were modest but comfortable, consisting of a small private room in the visitor quarters, with basic amenities including a bed, desk, and shared bathroom facilities. The walls were thin, and she could hear conversations and activities from neighboring rooms throughout the day and night. Despite the Spartan conditions, Sarah felt grateful for the opportunity to experience Michael's world firsthand and gain a deeper understanding of the challenges he faced every day. The first few days passed peacefully as Sarah adjusted to the rhythm of military life. She woke before dawn to the sound of reveille, watched the soldiers conduct their morning physical training, and observed the countless tasks required to maintain the base's operations. The mess hall served simple but hearty meals, and she enjoyed meeting other soldiers and hearing stories about their backgrounds and experiences. Michael worked long hours in the communications center, monitoring radio traffic and coordinating with other bases in the region. During his breaks, he showed Sarah around the base, explaining the purpose of different buildings and introducing her to his fellow soldiers. She was struck by the camaraderie and professionalism of the men and women serving alongside her boyfriend, each contributing their unique skills to the mission's success. In her spare time, Sarah volunteered to help with various tasks around the base, from organizing supplies in the warehouse to assisting with meal preparation in the kitchen. The soldiers appreciated her willingness to contribute, and she quickly became a welcome addition to the base community. Her positive attitude and eagerness to help earned her respect and friendship from personnel across all ranks and units. One evening, as Sarah and Michael sat together watching the sunset from a bench near the perimeter wall, she mentioned her childhood experiences with firearms. Her grandfather had been an avid hunter and had taught her to shoot rifles from a young age, taking her on hunting trips every fall until his death when she was 16. She had always possessed natural hand-eye coordination and steady nerves, qualities that made her an exceptional marksman even as a teenager. Michael listened with interest as she described the long hours she had spent learning to judge distance, account for wind conditions, and control her breathing while taking precise shots. Her grandfather had been a Korean War veteran who understood the importance of discipline and patience in marksmanship, and he had passed those lessons on to his granddaughter during their time together in the wilderness. During their conversation, Sarah mentioned that she had considered joining the military herself, but had ultimately chosen to pursue a college degree in education instead. She wanted to become a teacher and work with children, feeling that she could make a positive impact on young lives through education. However, she retained her love of shooting sports and continued to practice at local ranges whenever she had the opportunity. Michael was impressed by her background and suggested that she might enjoy visiting the base's shooting range during her stay. Many of the soldiers used their off-duty time to maintain their marksmanship skills, and civilian visitors were occasionally allowed to observe training exercises. Sarah expressed enthusiasm for the idea, excited about the prospect of seeing military weapons and techniques firsthand. As her first week at the base progressed, Sarah began to feel more comfortable with the daily routines and safety procedures. She learned to recognize the different alarm signals that indicated various levels of threat or emergency response. From routine drills to actual security alerts, the base conducted regular training exercises to ensure that all personnel remained prepared for potential attacks or other dangerous situations. The surrounding region had seen increased enemy activity in recent weeks, with intelligence reports suggesting that hostile forces were planning coordinated attacks against coalition bases. The soldiers maintained constant vigilance, conducting regular patrols and monitoring surveillance equipment around the clock. Sarah noticed the heightened tension among the personnel, but was reassured by their professionalism and preparedness. On her 8th day at the base, Sarah accompanied Michael to the shooting range during his off-duty time. The facility consisted of several covered firing positions with targets set at various distances up to 800 meters. She watched with fascination as soldiers practiced with different weapons, from standard-issue rifles to specialized sniper systems used by designated marksmen. The range sergeant, Master Sergeant Williams, was a grizzled veteran with over 20 years of military experience. He had served in multiple combat deployments and was responsible for training soldiers in advanced marksmanship techniques. When Michael introduced Sarah and mentioned her shooting background, Williams invited her to observe a training session more closely. During the session, Sarah watched as soldiers practiced engaging targets at long range using high-powered rifles equipped with advanced optical sights. The precision required was extraordinary, with shooters having to account for factors including wind speed, temperature, humidity, and target movement. She was amazed by the level of skill demonstrated by the designated marksman, who could consistently hit targets smaller than a dinner plate from distances exceeding 500 meters. Williams noticed Sarah's keen interest and technical questions about the equipment and techniques being demonstrated. When he learnt about her hunting background and natural shooting ability, he suggested that she might enjoy trying some of the weapons herself under proper supervision. Sarah was thrilled by the opportunity and eagerly accepted the invitation for the following day. That evening, as Sarah reflected on her experiences at the base, she felt a deep appreciation for the dedication and sacrifice of the soldiers serving so far from home. The reality of military life was both more challenging and more rewarding than she had imagined, with each day bringing new responsibilities and opportunities to serve something greater than oneself. She looked forward to her remaining time at the base and the chance to continue learning about Michael's world. The night passed peacefully, with Sarah falling asleep to the familiar sounds of the base settling into its nocturnal rhythm. Guards maintained their posts along the perimeter walls. Communication specialists monitored radio traffic from around the region, and the sophisticated sensor systems continued their silent watch for any signs of approaching danger. None of them could have predicted that within hours, Sarah's peaceful visit would be transformed into a desperate fight for survival that would test every skill she had learned and change the course of her life forever. The morning of Sarah's 9th day at Forward Operating Base Phoenix began like any other, with the familiar sound of reveille echoing across the compound at precisely 5:30 in the morning. She had grown accustomed to the early wake-up call and actually found herself enjoying the crisp desert air and the spectacular sunrise that painted the surrounding mountains in shades of gold and crimson. As she dressed in the civilian clothes she had been provided for her shooting range visit, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the day ahead. After breakfast in the mess hall, Sarah met Master Sergeant Williams at the armory, where he conducted a thorough safety briefing about the weapons she would be using. He explained the importance of treating every firearm as if it were loaded, never pointing the muzzle at anything she didn't intend to destroy, keeping her finger off the trigger until ready to shoot, and being absolutely certain of her target and what lay beyond it. These fundamental rules had been drilled into her by her grandfather years earlier, but she listened respectfully as Williams emphasized their critical importance in a military environment. The weapons available for civilian use were strictly controlled and limited to specific training rifles under direct supervision. Williams selected a bolt-action rifle similar to the hunting rifle Sarah had used with her grandfather, equipped with a high-quality telescopic sight that would allow her to engage targets at extended ranges. The rifle was heavier than she expected, with a precision-machined barrel and advanced stock system designed for maximum accuracy. At the shooting range, Williams set up targets at progressively longer distances, starting with paper targets at 100 meters, before advancing to steel silhouettes at 300 and 500 meters. Sarah's first few shots were slightly off target as she adjusted to the unfamiliar rifle, but her fundamental marksmanship skills quickly reasserted themselves. Her breathing control, trigger squeeze, and follow-through were all textbook perfect, impressing Williams with her natural ability and disciplined approach. As the morning progressed, Sarah's accuracy improved dramatically. She consistently hit the center of targets at 300 meters and was soon engaging the 500-meter targets with remarkable precision. Williams noted that her shooting ability exceeded that of many soldiers who had completed advanced marksmanship training, and he began to understand why her grandfather had been so proud of her skills during their hunting expeditions. During a break in the shooting session, Williams shared stories about his own military career and the importance of marksmanship in modern warfare. He explained that while most combat engagements occurred at relatively short ranges, the ability to make precise shots at extended distances could often determine the outcome of critical situations. He described scenarios where a single well-placed shot had saved entire units from ambush or prevented enemy forces from achieving their objectives. Sarah listened with fascination as Williams described the psychological aspects of precision shooting, including the importance of remaining calm under pressure, controlling breathing and heart rate, and making quick decisions about target priority and engagement timing. He emphasized that technical marksmanship skills were only part of the equation, with mental preparation and emotional control being equally critical for success in actual combat situations. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several soldiers who had come to practice their own marksmanship skills during their off-duty time. Among them was Corporal Jackson, a designated marksman who had recently returned from a patrol where his unit had encountered enemy forces in a distant valley. Jackson was friendly and approachable, immediately making Sarah feel welcome despite her civilian status. Jackson carried a different rifle than the training weapon Sarah had been using, a semi-automatic system with advanced optical equipment and accessories designed for combat operations. He explained that designated marksmen like himself served as force multipliers for their units, providing precision fire support and surveillance capabilities during patrols and defensive operations. The role required exceptional shooting skills combined with tactical awareness and the ability to work effectively as part of a larger team. When Jackson learned about Sarah's shooting background and her performance that morning, he invited her to observe his practice session with the more advanced weapons systems. Williams approved the request, understanding that the educational opportunity would give Sarah valuable insights into military marksmanship capabilities and techniques. She watched with amazement as Jackson engaged multiple targets in rapid succession, demonstrating the speed and accuracy required for combat situations. The practice session included scenarios where Jackson had to engage targets at varying distances while accounting for simulated wind conditions and time constraints. Sarah was impressed by his ability to rapidly acquire targets through the telescopic sight, make precise shots, and immediately transition to new targets without losing accuracy or composure. The level of skill required was far beyond anything she had experienced during her recreational shooting activities. As the afternoon approached, Williams suggested that Sarah might enjoy trying some of the more advanced techniques that Jackson had been demonstrating. Under careful supervision, she was allowed to use a semi-automatic rifle similar to Jackson's weapon, though without the specialized accessories used for combat operations. The increased rate of fire and different recoil characteristics required significant adjustment to her shooting technique. Initially, Sarah struggled with the faster pace and different feel of the semi-automatic system. Her shots were less precise than with the bolt-action rifle, and she had difficulty maintaining accuracy during rapid-fire sequences. However, with patient coaching from Williams and Jackson, she gradually adapted her technique to accommodate the new weapon's characteristics. Her natural shooting ability and disciplined approach to learning served her well as she worked to master the unfamiliar system. By late afternoon, Sarah had achieved respectable accuracy with the semi-automatic rifle and was beginning to understand the tactical applications of different weapon systems. Williams and Jackson were both impressed by her rapid progress and natural aptitude for marksmanship, noting that she possessed the fundamental skills and temperament that could be developed into truly exceptional shooting ability, with proper training and experience. As the shooting session concluded, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment. The day had provided her with valuable insights into military training and capabilities, while also allowing her to challenge herself with new and more demanding shooting techniques. She thanked Williams and Jackson for their patience and instruction, expressing genuine appreciation for the opportunity to learn from experienced professionals. That evening, Sarah joined Michael and several other soldiers for dinner in the mess hall, sharing stories about her day at the shooting range and the impressive skills she had observed. The soldiers were interested to hear her perspective as a civilian observer, and many complimented her on her own shooting performance based on reports from Williams and Jackson. The conversation was relaxed and friendly, with everyone enjoying the opportunity to discuss their shared interests in marksmanship and military life. After dinner, Sarah and Michael took their usual evening walk around the base perimeter, discussing her experiences and observations from the day. Michael was proud of her accomplishments and impressed by the positive reports he had received from the range instructors. He noted that her shooting skills and calm demeanor under pressure would be valuable assets in many different contexts, whether military or civilian. As they walked, Michael pointed out various defensive positions and explained the base's security measures in greater detail than he had previously shared. He described how the perimeter walls were equipped with sophisticated sensor systems that could detect movement or unusual activity from considerable distances. Guard towers provided overlapping fields of observation and fire, ensuring that no approach to the base could go undetected. The conversation turned to the current security situation in the region, with Michael explaining that intelligence reports had indicated increased enemy activity in recent weeks. Several nearby bases had reported probing attacks and surveillance activities, suggesting that hostile forces might be planning coordinated operations against coalition targets. Despite these concerns, Michael assured Sarah that forward operating Base Phoenix was well defended and prepared for any potential threats. As the sun set behind the surrounding mountains, Sarah reflected on how much she had learned during her visit to the base. Her understanding of military life had deepened considerably, and she felt a new appreciation for the challenges and responsibilities faced by soldiers serving in dangerous environments. The experience had also rekindled her interest in shooting sports and made her consider how she might continue developing her marksmanship skills after returning to civilian life. That night, Sarah fell asleep feeling grateful for the experiences she had gained and the relationships she had built during her time at the base. She looked forward to a final day of the visit and the opportunity to spend more quality time with Michael before beginning her long journey home. The base settled into its normal nighttime routine, with guards taking their positions and monitoring equipment maintaining its silent watch over the surrounding desert. In the darkness beyond the perimeter walls, enemy forces were making their final preparations for an attack that had been months in the planning. They had studied the base's defenses, identified potential weaknesses, and assembled the weapons and equipment needed for their assault. As Sarah slept peacefully in her quarters, she had no way of knowing that within hours, her peaceful visit would be transformed into a desperate battle where her newly demonstrated shooting skills would become the difference between life and death for everyone on the base. The attack began at 3:17 in the morning with a thunderous explosion that shook the entire base and shattered Sarah's peaceful sleep. She was thrown from her bed as the building trembled violently, emergency lighting flickering on as the main power grid suffered damage from the initial blast. Confused and disoriented, she scrambled to her feet as alarms began wailing throughout the compound, their piercing sound cutting through the night air like a knife through silence. Outside her window, Sarah could see flames and smoke rising from the motor pool area where the explosion had occurred. Secondary explosions followed as fuel and ammunition stores were ignited by the initial blast, sending orange fireballs into the dark sky and illuminating the surrounding desert with an eerie glow. The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions, indicating that enemy forces had breached the perimeter and were engaging the base's defenders in close combat. Sarah quickly dressed in the clothes she had laid out the night before, her hands shaking as adrenaline coursed through her system. She had participated in emergency drills during her stay, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of an actual attack. The sounds of combat were terrifying and overwhelming, with explosions, gunfire, and shouted orders creating a chaotic symphony of war that seemed to come from every direction at once. Through her window she could see soldiers running between buildings, some carrying wounded comrades while others moved toward defensive positions with weapons ready. Tracer rounds streaked through the darkness like deadly fireworks, and the distinctive crack of sniper rifles could be heard above the general din of battle. It was clear that the base was under coordinated assault by a well-organized enemy force that had planned their attack carefully. A pounding on her door interrupted her observations as Michael burst into her room, his face grim and his uniform hastily thrown on over his sleeping clothes. He carried his rifle in full combat gear, ready for immediate deployment to his assigned position in the communications center. His first concern was for Sarah's safety, and he quickly explained that all civilian personnel were being evacuated to a secure bunker located beneath the command center. The evacuation route to the bunker required crossing approximately 200 meters of open ground between Sarah's quarters and the command center. Michael explained that they would need to move quickly and stay low to avoid enemy fire, following a zigzag pattern between buildings and defensive barriers. Sarah's heart pounded as she realized that her life now depended on successfully navigating through an active combat zone. As they prepared to leave the building, a massive explosion rocked the communications center, sending debris flying in all directions and knocking both Sarah and Michael to the ground. When the dust cleared, they could see that a rocket-propelled grenade had struck the building's antenna array, severely damaging the base's ability to communicate with higher headquarters and request reinforcements or air support. Michael's face went pale as he realized the implications of the communications breakdown. Without radio contact, the base would be unable to coordinate with other units in the region or call for the helicopter evacuation that had been planned for civilian personnel. They were effectively cut off from outside assistance and would have to defend themselves with only the resources available on the base. The original evacuation plan was no longer viable, as enemy forces had positioned themselves between Sarah's location and the secure bunker. Michael quickly assessed their options and decided that the safest course of action would be to move to the base's armory, where additional weapons and ammunition were stored, and where other soldiers would likely be gathering to organize the defense. The armory was located in a reinforced concrete building designed to withstand direct attack, with thick walls and limited access points that could be easily defended. More importantly, it contained the advanced weapons systems that would be needed to repel the enemy assault, including sniper rifles, heavy machine guns, and anti-tank weapons. If they could reach the armory safely, they would be in a much better position to survive the attack. The route to the armory required crossing the base's central courtyard, an area that was partially exposed to enemy fire but offered the most direct path to their destination. Michael explained that they would need to move during a lull in the fighting, using smoke from burning buildings to conceal their movement from enemy observers positioned on the surrounding hills.
As they waited for the right moment to move, Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of incoming mortar rounds whistling through the air before exploding throughout the base.
The enemy was using indirect fire weapons to target key facilities including the command center, medical facility, and vehicle maintenance areas.
Each explosion sent shockwaves through the ground and filled the air with deadly shrapnel and debris. Master Sergeant Williams appeared suddenly from behind a concrete barrier, moving in a low crouch with his rifle ready. He had been attempting to reach the armory himself when he spotted Sarah and Michael taking cover near the communications building. Williams quickly assessed their situation and agreed that the armory represented their best chance for survival, offering both protection and access to the weapons needed to mount an effective defense. The three of them waited for a break in the enemy fire before sprinting across the open courtyard, zigzagging between obstacles and diving for cover behind vehicles and concrete barriers. Sarah's heart pounded as bullets cracked overhead and mortar rounds exploded nearby, sending dirt and debris flying in all directions. She had never experienced anything remotely comparable to the terror and intensity of combat, but her grandfather's lessons about staying calm under pressure served her well. They reached the armory building just as another wave of enemy fighters attempted to breach the main gate. The sound of intense fighting erupted from that direction, with soldiers manning defensive positions and pouring fire into the attacking force. Sarah could see muzzle flashes and tracer rounds streaking back and forth as both sides engaged in desperate close-range combat. Inside the armory, they found a dozen other soldiers who had gathered to access heavy weapons and coordinate their defense efforts. The ranking officer present was Lieutenant Morrison, a young but experienced infantry officer who had taken charge of organizing the base's resistance after the communications center had been damaged. Morrison was relieved to see Williams arrive, as his expertise with weapon systems would be critical for the defense. Morrison quickly briefed them on the tactical situation, explaining that enemy forces had attacked from 3 different directions simultaneously, overwhelming the perimeter guards and penetrating deep into the base before the defenders could organize an effective response. The attackers appeared to be well-trained and heavily armed, with advanced weapons and equipment that suggested significant planning and preparation. The base's defensive strategy had been disrupted by the loss of communications and the destruction of several key facilities, forcing the defenders to fight independently without centralized coordination. Morrison estimated that approximately 50 enemy fighters had penetrated the base perimeter, while additional forces remained positioned on the surrounding hills to prevent escape and provide fire support for the assault teams.